Strengthened through life's challenges. So that's the series for the next many weeks. And tonight, focusing on growing through rejection. We'll be out of Exodus chapter 2 and chapter 4 and chapter 5. Oh, and chapter 6.
Any more?
Anybody? Yeah. So we have quite a bit to look at here tonight. Now, our society doesn't handle rejection well. Fights, shootings, and self-harm are some consequences of how many handle rejection. Even Christians who feel that God has rejected them. Sometimes Christians feel this way because of maybe a past sin or maybe a current sin that we've gotten ourselves into. We feel rejected by God, and at that moment often launch into various kinds of destructive attitudes and patterns. So we're not exempt, is what I'm trying to say. Christians aren't exempt from the problem of rejection. But what's different with Christians is that we have a means in which we can handle it, that the world really doesn't have. And we ought to employ that means. So here's the purpose tonight. To understand that in rejection, God hears, remembers, and is in charge. So let's start with this. Exodus chapter 2. Let me read verses 11 through 15, and I've got some questions for you. Exodus chapter 2, starting in verse 11. Now it came about in those days when Moses had grown up that he went out to his brethren and looked on their hard labors, and he saw an Egyptian beating a Hebrew, one of his brethren. So he looked this way and that, and when he saw there was no one around, he struck down the Egyptian and hid him in the sand. I mean, just brutal, right? That's how they are in the Middle East. They're just brutal like this. Anyhow, we'll keep on. He went out the next day, and behold, two Hebrews were fighting with each other. And he said to the offender, "Why are you striking your companion?" But he said, "Who made you a prince or a judge over us? Are you intending to kill me as you killed the Egyptian?" Then Moses was afraid and said, "Surely the matter has become known." When Pharaoh heard of this matter, he tried to kill Moses. But Moses fled from the presence of Pharaoh and settled in the land of Midian, and he sat down by a well. What do you think motivated Moses in the Egyptians' abusive treatment of the Hebrews? What made Moses want to act? Like, what was going on there? What do you see? Any thoughts? What motivated him to intervene? Okay, protection. So he wanted to protect the Hebrews because he was a Hebrew, wasn't he? He wasn't of Pharaoh's family. He wasn't an Egyptian. He was found in a basket by Pharaoh's daughter, right, who took him in. He's an adopted one into the family. So he has a real close connection with the Hebrew people, I would say. Any other thoughts on that? What motivated him to intervene? Compassion. They were slaves, weren't they? They were continually being mistreated. And that must have hurt him. If he grew up with the rest of them, he would have been one of them. But because of the circumstance at that particular situation or that time, and he was placed in that basket in the water, and the daughter of Pharaoh found him, his situation was a little bit different. But there was compassion. And there was a lot of hurt in him. Okay, so, yes.
I find it interesting, though. He wasn't Egyptian. Passion.
Yep.
I don't know. Maybe he was thinking just because
That's a good point.
There's a fear level. Egyptians, maybe he just didn't like that.
To the extent that he would kill an Egyptian, the ones he was being raised by. So that is an interesting point. Well, good. Yes, Jennifer. Okay, yeah, absolutely. Yes.
Slaves were. He don't that Pharaoh was out there
Okay, some loyalty to Pharaoh.
justice involved.
Okay, yeah. Good point. It's interesting to think through this here and try to understand it. Well, okay, so let's look at those two Hebrews for a moment. Two Hebrews are fighting, and Moses steps in, and they respond to Moses. What was their response? Why do you care? Yeah, are you going to kill us also? Like, why are you getting involved? Now, how would you feel if you had tried to right an injustice and your efforts were rejected? Have you been there before? You ever tried to right an injustice and it backfired on you? And that's what's happening with Moses.
Daniel Penny.
Twice now. What's that?
Ask Daniel Penny how that worked out.
Oh, the Marine? Yeah. Yeah, that's a very interesting thing. They said they went way. You're talking about tiers. They went to a tier that doesn't even exist when they went after him. Yes. Okay, good question. Did Moses intend to kill the Egyptian? I don't think he intended it, but likely breaking it up, a fight happened, and Moses killed him. Yeah. Yeah, good question. Did he fall? No, it was because Pharaoh was after him, it was a hands-on, purposeful slaying of the Egyptian. Yep. So you have these two Hebrews. They're battling it out. You come in and you want to fix the injustice. You want to fix the situation. You want to help out. And then immediately they reject you. Wow. Well, in verse 15, to make matters worse, Pharaoh heard about the situation. And what does Pharaoh do? He doesn't want to discuss it. He just says, I'm going to kill Moses. I mean, this is bad, and bad. So what does Moses do? He ends up running away. And for 40 years, he was isolated in the desert, working as a shepherd. And this was a guy of royalty, by the way. I think I would feel pretty rejected that I had a high position. Even though adopted, still had a high position under Pharaoh. People still listened. And then it was all taken away from me in a matter of a moment because the Hebrews rejected me. My own people rejected me. They must have been the ones that were talking about it. They had to have been the ones that spread the information. Nobody else saw. Nobody else knew. It was only the Hebrew that lived. Remember, Moses looked both ways. There was only two people in front of him. It was the Egyptian and the Hebrew. The Egyptian died. That Hebrew was the one that started going around saying everything, which ended up getting back to Pharaoh. So it was his own people that rejected him. So here, Moses runs out into the desert 40 years working as a shepherd. Then God appeared and told him to deliver the Hebrews from the Egyptians. Well, hold it, God. I need another 40 years to process this because I'm really hurt by this. You really want me to go down there? And as you recall, Moses protested. And then he started to really center that protesting around, but I'm not the right guy because I can't speak well. So God calls on Aaron, Moses' brother, to help him. So let's jump over to chapter 4. Chapter 4, let me read 27 through 31. And we'll discuss this here. Chapter 4, verse 27. Now the Lord said to Aaron, "Go to meet Moses in the wilderness." So he went and met him at the mountain of God and kissed him. Moses told Aaron all the words of the Lord with which he had sent him and all the signs he had commanded him to do. Then Moses and Aaron went and assembled all the elders of the sons of Israel, and Aaron spoke all the words which the Lord had spoken to Moses, right? Because Moses didn't feel like he could say anything. He then performed the signs in the sight of the people. So the people believed. And when they heard that the Lord was concerned about the sons of Israel and that he had seen their affliction, then they bowed low and worshiped. All right, hone in just for a moment on verses 27 and 28. What would Aaron's coming to meet Moses mean to each of them because of their new assignments? What do you think it meant to Moses that Aaron showed up? Affirmation? Confirmation? Yeah. Okay, so that God followed through, didn't he? Okay, Moses, I told you you could do this, but you're obviously going to fight me on this. So I'll have Aaron come and help you. Moses is like, yeah, I don't know. I've been rejected before. And then all of a sudden, Aaron shows up. Aaron's like, hey, I'll help you. And Moses is like, oh, well, I'll go with you. We'll team up and we'll do this that God has called us to do. Okay, yeah. Now, okay, hone in on verses 29 and through 31 here. How do you account for the people's response to Moses and Aaron? Like, how did the sons of Israel... Now, this is the people in Egypt. So they had to have come down to Egypt because they weren't out there in the desert wandering around, right? That isn't until later on. So Moses and Aaron left that area where Moses was shepherding for 40 years, and they went to Egypt. So Moses is going back into a very familiar place, but also a place of absolute rejection. Rejection by the Egyptians, rejection by his own people, and rejection by Pharaoh. So here he enters into this place, and he tells them, Moses tells the people through Aaron, right? Aaron's actually the spokesman here. And notice here that Moses and Aaron in verse 29 went and assembled all the elders of the sons of Israel. They went to the elders first, which is the respectful thing to do. They went to the guys kind of in charge. Aaron spoke all the words. He performed the signs in the sight of the people. So now they're before all the people, and the people believed it. And when they heard that the Lord was concerned about them, and that God had seen their affliction, had seen their pain, seen how they've been mistreated all these years. Do you know how many years they've been enslaved at this point? They've been there for 400 years. That's a bad situation, right? But originally, do you know how they got to Egypt? Yeah, they went there. Exactly. During the famine, they went and they stayed down there. And then the result was they were enslaved because they became too many. And Pharaoh's like, whoa, wait a minute. These guys, there's so many of these Hebrews, they're going to take us over. Why don't we enslave them? We'll take everything away from them. We'll force labor on them and have absolute control. So they've been like this, generation after generation after generation after generation. So for them to know that God was concerned about them, and for them to know that God had seen their affliction and their hurt and their pain, it must have meant something to them. An awful lot. So how did they respond? What do you see here? How did they respond to Moses and Aaron? Yeah, they accepted what they were saying, didn't they? Life is weird sometimes. You can go through, on one hand, you can go through this major rejection, and on the other hand, this major acceptance. And it can be by the same people, or at least close relatives even. And life is just weird sometimes. What I've come to the conclusion of, you just can't always figure it out. But what we can do is figure out how to handle situations. I can't always figure out why people respond the way they do. Can't figure out why rejected on one end and accepted on the other. I don't understand that. But I certainly can try to figure out how I'm going to respond to these things. And I wonder what Moses' thinking was at this moment. That 40 years ago, I tried to save you guys. I took matters in my own hand. It was a slow process maybe I had planned out, but I was going to try to figure something out. And you rejected me. But now you're accepting what I'm saying. The roller coasters of life. What's that? He did, didn't he? Yeah. He struggled with it. Yeah. I would think that the burning bush would be a good opportunity to accept that, something miraculous is going on here, right? But no, Moses just wanted to fight about it, right? For a little bit. He just wanted to argue for a little bit. He did. He did. Now, how would the elders' response, do you suppose, begin to heal the pain of rejection Moses had faced 40 years earlier? Not only the response of the elders, but the people. Do you think it would start to heal him that his own people were accepting him at that moment? What does that healing look like, do you think? What does that type of healing look like? Because there's hurt in rejection, right? What does it look like to be healed or in the process of being healed from a rejection? You can just feel it. Is there some type of response to that or a letting go? There's a piece to it. Okay, yes. Okay, a new confidence. Yeah. Oh, and forgiveness. All right. Peace, confidence, forgiveness.
God had told
Refreshing.
God had told him to talk. My eloquence.
Okay, so he was reaffirmed that he was in the right place. Is that what you're doing the right thing?
Right thing.
Yeah. So almost a sense of purpose, even in that. There is this thing about healing from rejection that is a plethora of emotions and attributes that happen to arise that really affect a person. And that tells me that rejection has the ability to not just affect a part of a person's life, but many parts of a person's life. I mean, just you heard what some of us said, and maybe you were thinking even some things too, that what does the healing look like that Moses may have experienced at this time? It was a bunch of things. But think about all those things are the things that were affected by one thing, rejection. Rejection's powerful. It's powerful in destroying a person's life. So remember that when people come to you. We have to be careful not to reject. It's easy to beat up on people. It's easy to tear people down. in that process, there's a rejection, but it affects them in many ways, not just one way. And for a long time, rejection is just, it's so powerful in the wrong way. Yeah. I tell you, you're right. It's so much easier to reject than forgive, though, isn't it? It's easy to reject, but once a person is rejected, it's hard for that person to forgive. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Okay, so you remember the account. Moses told Pharaoh to let his people go. All right, so that's where Moses ends up going over to Pharaoh, standing in front of Pharaoh, and said, hey, you need to do this because my God said for you to do this. And what Pharaoh's response was, in short, no. And to make matters worse, he made the Hebrew their jobs worse. He started taking things away from them, so they had to make these bricks out of hardly anything, and they had to make more bricks out of nothing. So he put them to work. He just cruel to them. He made their lives worse. Okay, keep that in mind here. Let's look at chapter 5, verses 19 through 21. Chapter 5, starting here in verse 19, says this. The foreman of the sons of Israel saw that they were in trouble, because they were told, you must not reduce your daily amount of bricks. When they left Pharaoh's presence, they met Moses and Aaron as they were waiting for them. They said to them, may the Lord look upon you and judge you, for you have made us odious in Pharaoh's sight and in the sight of his servants, to put a sword in their hand to kill us. Okay, I'll stop there. Did you notice there's new rejection? Moses is being rejected again by the same people. How would you suppose that this new rejection by the Hebrews would be harder for Moses to deal with? Do you think it would be harder? That he was rejected again by his own people? Yeah, they were his people. Rejected once, left, came back, and they were, hey, this is exciting. Thank you, Moses. We're grateful. We forgive you. We worship God.
He would probably start questioning God too.
Well, I wonder,
What you told me to do.
Yeah, he goes to Pharaoh and says, Pharaoh, let my people go. And Pharaoh says, no. Matter of fact, I'm going to make your people work harder with a lot less material. And then the people go to Moses and they say, Moses, may God judge you for what you've done to us. Rejected again by the same people. God told him to set the people free, but the situation just got worse. Okay, it's exhausting, isn't it? This up and down. Look at verses 22 and 23, chapter 5. 22 and 23. Then Moses returned to the Lord and said, O Lord, why have you brought harm to this people? Why did you ever send me? Ever since I came to Pharaoh to speak in your name, he has done harm to this people, and you have not delivered your people at all. He's hurting. He's hurting so bad that he's questioning God. And that happens, by the way, for Christians. When we're rejected, a lot of times we go to God and say, why did you let this happen? Why were you a part of this? Or you know what's going on. Why did this happen the way it happened? And I think we Christians do this often, or not often. Maybe often is too often. How about we do this every now and then, that when we are hurt, we pass that on to God. It's almost like we're trying to hurt him a little bit. Why did you, God, hurt me. Sometimes what we're saying. I get that feel from Moses here. He's really upset. What else do you see here? How did Moses respond to the second rejection of the Hebrews? Anything else you see in those couple of verses there?
Questioning himself again.
He's questioning himself. Why'd you send me? So now, that rejection is tearing down that confidence that we thought we had when that rejection was dealt with initially. Okay, what would you say? Confidence, okay. Somebody. So God knows exactly what's happening. And we're going to talk about this a little bit later. But yes, God knows exactly what's happening, but Moses doesn't. And he's hurt. Yeah. And his confidence is being torn down and moved away. Yes. Exactly. When I pray, I always want things to happen now. Like I'm like that. And for Moses, it wasn't. Instead, he's being rejected all over again. And Pharaoh's telling him no. But God said it would happen. God told me to go deal with this. God allowed me to do miracles, to throw down a rod. And the magicians threw down their rod and they both turned into a snake. But my snake ate his snake. God was showing his power. Okay, chapter 6. Let's read verses 1 through 8. Chapter 6, 1 through 8. Okay, verse 1. Then the Lord said to Moses, "Now you shall see what I will do to Pharaoh. For under compulsion he will let them go, and under compulsion he will drive them out of his land." God spoke further to Moses and said to him, I can almost hear God saying, "Oh, by the way, I am the Lord." And by the way, I appeared to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob as God Almighty. Now Moses, I can picture Moses kind of sinking, right? He's like, "But by my name, Lord," which by the way, this in Hebrew would be the Yahweh, "I did not make myself known to them. I also established my covenant with them to give them the land of Canaan, the land in which they sojourned. Furthermore, I have heard the groaning of the sons of Israel, because the Egyptians are holding them in bondage. And I have remembered my covenant. Say therefore to the sons of Israel, I am the Lord. I will bring you out from under the burdens of the Egyptians, and I will deliver you from their bondage. I will also redeem you with an outstretched arm and with great judgments. Then I will take you for my people, and I will be your God, and you shall know that I am the Lord your God, who brought you out from under the burdens of the Egyptians. I will bring you to the land which I swore to give to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and I will give it to you for a possession. I am the Lord." Now, in answer to Moses' accusation against God, specifically here in verse 2, how does God identify himself? What do you see? I am the Lord. Now, Moses just got done telling him a few things, right? Telling God a few things. Why have you done this? Ever since I came to Pharaoh to speak in your name, he has done harm to his people, and you did not deliver any of them. And then God says, "Ooh, I am the Lord." What else do you see, like in verse 3? How does God identify himself? I am God Almighty. Yeah. The God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Yeah. The one before you, Moses. The one that's been around for a while. The one that has set up this whole system here. The one who has created a covenant and will fulfill that covenant. I wonder if Moses is being put in his place right now. Verse 4 and 5 through 8, if you kind of hone in on that, what does God say about his past actions and his future actions? I kind of gave a little bit in verse 3, but what does he say? What does God say about his past actions and future actions? I kind of let the cat out of the bag already, but. And, okay, yes, established his covenant, and he is going to free them and put them into the land of Canaan. I'm going to do this. I wonder, Moses has two options at this point. One, believe God or not. Right? What did God say about who is really in charge in this situation? Was it Pharaoh? God wasn't afraid of Pharaoh at all. He wasn't concerned about Pharaoh at all. Matter of fact, God wasn't concerned about any of this situation. Over and over and over he kept saying that. Don't you know who I am? He made Pharaoh. Exactly. But and this is the thing. Moses isn't thinking right. This is another aspect of rejection. It causes us to think wrong. And it causes us to think wrong of God. It causes us to think wrong of God's abilities. It causes us to think wrong of God's sovereignty. And it causes us to think wrong of what God is doing with us. The purpose, what you alluded to or what you said just a few moments ago. And we like Moses, blame God for the rejection that took place toward us. And remove God out of the picture. Here, what God is doing is he's bringing Moses back into this circle of reality. I am Lord. I'm the God Almighty. I spoke to your fathers long ago. I'm the one who created a covenant with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. I'm the one who's going to set them free. I'm the one who's going to put them back in the land that I gave them. And hopefully that's resetting Moses' thought pattern here of, oh, wait a minute. Their rejection toward me caused me to reject God, and God is setting everything back into its rightful place. Seems to be the formula here of rejection, though. Yes.
Interesting that I've seen Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob.
Yes. So, God and Moses have something special going on. Another reminder to Moses about reality, isn't it? Rejection always pulls us out of reality. Just know that to be true. Always, always, always pulls us out of reality. And anytime we are pulled out of reality, we get all discombobulated and out of sorts, and everything goes haywire in our world. When we remove God from the central place in our life, things go crazy for us. Rejection is when we are rejected and we put that onto God, we move him out of the way, and things get worse. It's just a formula that tends to be the way it is almost every time. So, when you face rejection, it makes a difference in how we respond to rejection when we have a right understanding of God. That number one, when we are rejected, God hears the rejection. He's not distant from it. He hears it. He knows it happened. He knows you have been rejected. He knows I've been rejected. Number two, he remembers the rejection. We remember it 40 years later with Moses. We remember it. So does God. He never forgot it. He knows that you've been rejected. And number three, when we face rejection, we have to remember that God is in charge. That's what he's telling him here. God is telling Moses, I have heard, I remember, and I am in charge, Moses. This is who I am, and this is what's going to happen, no matter what. And we have to remember that about rejection. God hears it, God remembers it, no matter how many years later, and God is still in charge. And for me, what that does is it keeps my confidence in God and His purpose for my life. That I may have rejection out here, but it doesn't spoil, or it doesn't negate, or it doesn't set to the side what God is doing in me and through me, the purpose for the kingdom. Because God not only heard, not only remembers it, but He was in charge and remains in charge the whole time. To me, that's powerful. So we cannot allow rejection to cause us to reject God. If we maintain God as the central one before us, then the rejection that comes to us can be dealt with. If we remove God from the central post in front of us, that's when the rejection will not be dealt with. And it'll hurt us, and our world it'll go crazy. It will become emotional basket cases, right? Who knows what will happen? We'll just become mean, grumpy people. Put God right back center. Know that He heard you, or He heard the situation. Know that He still remembers what happened, and know that He's as in charge as He is today, so He was when you were rejected. So He was when He told Abraham that He was going to set up a covenant. So He was all the way back in Genesis chapter 3, verse 15, when He promised the Messiah to come to deal with the sin problem from Adam and Eve. Always in charge. Never once has He failed to be in charge. Okay, it's 7 o'clock. Let me close in prayer. Mighty God, your people go through rejection in different ways. Maybe not so much like Moses, but certainly in other ways. And through this account of Moses, it does recenter us to make sure that we don't blame you, that we don't attack you, that we don't get to that place in our heart where we think you didn't hear and you have forgotten. Thank you for recentering us on you. If we keep our eyes on you during the rejection, after the rejection, then that rejection will have no power over us. May we never forget this account that you have given us here in Exodus, that we may always keep you centrally focused, and that then rejection will lose its power. In Jesus' name, amen. Right.